Happy Friday, everyone. Good to see you. Just waiting for all the systems to go live here, so bear with me as we await the live status. On all of our platforms, we're broadcasting today on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and of course, the home base called LinkedIn. And if you can hear me, that would be great to signal so in the chat box. Wherever you're joining from, let me know in the chat box. Good to see everyone. Today is Friday. It's career happy hour, meaning it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Here on the West Coast, it's 3 o'clock Pacific time. That means every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, I will be here, weather permitting, of course. And if I'm not on vacation or some other act of nature prevents me from coming to this session, I'm here to really support you as a community. This community called Career Happy Hour meets every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And if you put your LinkedIn profile in the chat, what you're signaling to everyone is that you're open. It's hard enough to network, isn't it? It's hard enough to network. So if you would put your LinkedIn profile in the chat, that would be awesome. Good. So who am I? I'm Andrew Beach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help professionals like you communicate their value to find great opportunities faster. That's whether you're working or not. I do that through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. Personal, professional branding, of course, and planning, meaning, hey, how do we map what you want to have accomplished into something great? And then, of course, the effective networking piece. That's where a lot of people that I know, whether they're working or not, have a big challenge. Is getting the networking done, getting it started. Incubating over time is also a challenge. So good to see everyone. If you would please just signal chat-wise that you're here and you're present in today's session. You know, I was thinking this week about interviews, and you know, there's a lot that goes into preparing for, and delivering an interview. And I can imagine that many of you have been in this position too, and so have I, where we put so much effort in identifying and securing the interview and then performing it that once we're done, we feel like we're done. And that isn't true. So our minds can fool ourselves. And that means that sometimes when you get done with the interview, it's not done. There might be another interview. There might be some follow-up required. There might be a practical test. And often we're exhausted and we think everything is done and that the next step is an offer. And it may not be. It may be another step in between. And that's the crazy thing about job search is it sometimes can be easy. Other times it can be difficult. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's painless. And that's part of the journey. And many of us miss the value of the journey because we're either full of anxiety about having secured something if we don't have it, or we're full of anxiety about performing our current work while we're trying to find something else. So there's emotion and certainly mental and a horsepower required to be successful. The other thing I'd like you to do is if you have any questions at all, certainly put those in the chat, but share this broadcast out with other people. We want to have a broader network base of people so that we can get more traction, more exposure for you. It's not so much for me. I do this for fun. I mean, I do this to give back to the community. And that's why I encourage you to put your profile in the chat. Networking's hard enough. Why don't we make it a little easier by lubricating or in some way releasing the friction that comes with meeting and conversing and collaborating with new people. So that's why we put our profiles in the chat, and sharing it out allows us to bring more people in with which we can do that kind of networking. There's also live coaching today, every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, Career Happy Hour. There's a link in the description. If you click on the see more button, I don't know if you can see that, but on LinkedIn, at least in the description at the top right of the screen, you will see a see more. You'll see more. And below there, it'll say join me live for free coaching. And there's a link there. That'll bring you into what I affectionately call the green room. It's just a private chat area. And so a couple of things about that. Some of you may not want to post your questions publicly. That's fine. Go ahead and click that link, come into the waiting room here, the green room, and say, hey, I have a confidential question, and put your question in there. And in some way, shape, or form or fashion, I will answer that question. You don't have to put your name in if you don't want to, or just put first name, last name, something of that nature. And I'm perfectly happy to answer your questions that way as well. Or if you want, I'll put on my headphones and we can collaborate together for free. I did that with one other person several weeks ago, and they got a lot of value out of it. And I think they're working somewhere else now. So it's funny how much traction you can get through a simple coaching conversation with a person and get them into that right space. Otherwise, hey, if you have some questions, go and put those in the chat. So again, on this topic of interviewing, it takes so much time, energy, and effort for us to get secure, deliver on that interview that we sometimes feel like that it's done, that our search is over, when really it's not over until the day we start work, which means there's likely a lot of follow-up. So what kind of follow-up could you do post-interview? Well, certainly there's the customary thing of sending a thank you note. That's good. That would be a minimum standard, but I would really establish a standard of practice that after every interview, I want to block about 20 to 30 minutes. And I know that's a lot of time, 20 to 30 minutes after the interview to do nothing other than brain dump. What questions did they ask? What sort of, how did I feel about it? How did they respond when I shared some of my stories? Did it seem like a conversation? Was there something I missed? Was there a question that they asked that I didn't really have an effective answer for? And sometimes it's just being honest that maybe it wasn't a fit. And it's funny. I was talking to somebody this last week saying, I interviewed for this one job. I interviewed for one job in the last week and I didn't get it. So I lost that opportunity. Well, no, they selected somebody else. They didn't reject you. They selected someone. They chose someone else. That's not anything to do with you, which is weird and hard to process for a lot of people. The idea is that they chose someone else. They didn't reject you. In fact, if you look at the numbers, on average, there's probably between 300 and 500 applicants in any one requisition, any one job posting. You were one of the finalists. So if I was one of the 5 or 6 that got interviewed, I'd feel pretty good that I was the top 1% of the candidates for that job. And then it was about fit. And maybe it just wasn't a fit, either culturally, or maybe they had somebody else they already knew that was kind of the preferred candidate, or they had somebody established. I mean, this stuff happens all the time. It's happened to me. And if it hasn't happened to you, it probably will. So I'm trying to give you a heads up on what's normal. What's normal? That that nothing is normal, I guess is the situation there, is that just when you think that the interviewing is over, it's not. Just when you think you're exhausted and can't do anymore, there's another process to go through. And it's definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. We need to have the staying power to go through with each company we're talking to and make sure that we cover all our bases. What else could I do to follow up? Well, I could certainly call my references and get them at the ready for when that employer asks. I could follow up with the recruiter, let them know how the interview went, ask them what the next steps are. What is the process there? And, sometimes that could be a recruitment coordinator or someone that's an administrative support for that team to give you the heads up or the situation report. So there's a lot to be said there. Certainly, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer. This also being summer, I think we're also seeing a lot of disengagement by people because they're taking some of their first, at least in our geography, some of their first vacations in 2 years. And, on top of that, they may be frustrated in trying to find a place to stay. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine this morning about that, is that there's so many places right now that are trying to staff back up. That's restaurants, that's hotels, that's anything in hospitality, travel, that sort of thing. They're trying to staff back up, and the demand is so high that they don't have enough people to service the folks that are looking to vacation or just get out of town for a couple of days. And that puts them in a position of having to reduce the number of customers that they can serve at any one time. And that's actually probably a good thing. I think that's going to lead to increase wages for sure. And for some professions that really it was overdue. It's also going to lead to people seeking opportunities outside of their domain. So that's another thing to think about. So just because you've completed the interview, don't think that this person may not have a vacation plan and you're expecting to get an answer in a week and they're going to be gone for 2. And then the next person on the team is going to be gone for 2. And sometimes they're overlapping vacations and you might not hear for 6 weeks what the status of that interview is. 6 weeks. I know it's a long time. Some companies are a little more agile that way. They make a decision. It's either a yes or a no. It's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. There's no confusion there. There's a lot of clarity about whether or not that person is going to move forward in a hiring process. Good. If you have any questions, put those in the chat box, please. I am happy to answer. I can drone on for hours about different things. I also wanted to show you that there's another resource here that has news that I think everyone ought to at least consider here in the United States as a tool to be familiar with what's going on in the marketplace. And it's called the Business Journal. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick. And I just want you to see what sorts of things you might be able to find because you're subscribed to their emails. Now, I get this obscure email about a bioscience company in the Portland area where I am, and it didn't really share much. But when I clicked on the article, it at least brought up the company name. It doesn't always do that. And then it says here the company is going public on the NASDAQ. Oh, but whoops, it's actually showing here you need to unlock this article. You're forced to have a subscription to read the article. You only get so many free articles a month. I think it's like 3 articles a month. I mean, who's not going to use 3 articles a month? You could do that. You could click on a link on accident and get those 3 articles. But what I wanted to show you, at least on this, is that regardless of what city you're looking to come from, see here, we are in we're in Portland. So here's Portland, but all of these cities have a business journal. And so let's say I'm looking to relocate to, I don't know, Dallas. Dallas has a business journal. What about Phoenix? Phoenix has a business journal. I might also be looking at Tampa. Look at that. Tampa Bay has a business journal. And then if I wanted to go to Seattle, it isn't a Seattle. It's it says Seattle. I think it's the Puget Sound Business Journal. So it covers a much broader area. But the reason I bring this up is often they'll send you these emails. They're free and they have some information on them, but they're not sharing very much. And then you'll come here and then it's blocked out. So this reminds me a lot of what the Wall Street Journal does in terms of, limiting access unless you're a paid customer, that sort of thing. But I can hit. So the funny thing is, I've gotten really good at using keyboard shortcuts. So if you're not used to using keyboard shortcuts, what I typically do is I will take and I will refresh this page, and you'll notice something interesting is that it'll show you here all of the content of the particular story. And so a couple of things, I actually have a plugin here. I'm not sure what it's called. It's called, let's see, Reader View Plus. And I like that. It gets rid of all the advertisements. So that's nice. But in this case, that's a different tool. in this case, you can see there's the article, and then it really quickly refreshes, and they block the article saying you need to have a subscription. So what I've done is I've said, okay, I'm going to refresh this page, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to press Control A and Control C. Control A, Control C, and do that in quick succession. Control A is select all. So if you're familiar with, or Command A, I guess, is probably the same thing on Mac. But so I'll go ahead and refresh this, and then I'll hit Control A. It'll select that entire story, and then I'll hit Control C, and it actually will copy that story. And then I'll just bring up a notepad here, and I'll paste that article right into Notepad. And here I can now read the body of this story and get all the information without having to pay for the premium. So hopefully the Business Journal isn't watching this live stream, or they might learn how to turn that off. But it's the irritating part about reading articles on LinkedIn and getting emails from services like this is, sometimes that data is protected, and for good reason, right? They want to get people to sign up for the subscriptions. But for one article on the Wall Street Journal that I read once a quarter, I don't need that subscription. It would be nice once in a while for people to share the article without having to pay. But that's just the way it is. So if you have any questions, of course, put that in the chat. If you want to come in for live coaching, there's a link in the description. We're talking today primarily about post-interview follow-up. It's something I have top of my mind at the moment. If you want to, you can share out this broadcast wherever you're joining from. There should be a share button down below the video. Just go ahead and click that share button and distribute that out to the networks that you have. Awesome. So post-interview follow-up, I could, one thing we talked about is sending the thank you notes. Well, if you have a street address, I would send a thank you note to the street address, handwritten, and I'd also send an email. Now, what I did advocate is post-interview, I'd probably block 20, 30 minutes of time just to brain dump, so that you know what to put in that thank you note. You know how to improve your interview for the next time. And in fact, it's probably not a bad idea, since most of our interviews are remote, is that you might want to record that interview if you can. There's lots of tools to do that. This virtual background is actually done through OBS, which is open broadcast software. If you invest a little time learning how to use that software, it's free and open source. You don't have to pay for it. I know on Mac, I think there's QuickTime. QuickTime will allow you to record a screen. And so the nice thing is you can go back and look at that. See, how did you respond? How did they respond? And sometimes you're looking in a camera, you're not looking at the person because you want to make a connection with that person. And these virtual interviews have a lot of nuance to them. And some things are just missed. And you may end up getting to the interview thinking it's one thing, and lo and behold, they're looking for something else. And that's perfectly normal. The whole purpose of an interview is to figure out fit. And perhaps there wasn't a fit, but that was a networking conversation. So now I have a new member of my network that knows me a little bit better because we invested time getting to know each other and determine fit. That's another follow-up. So one of the follow-ups you might have with anybody that you add to your network is, when should I get back to this person? If it turns out I don't get the job, should I add them to my network? And if so, how often should I follow up with them and circle back or offer them contribution based on what they do need at that time versus what I offer? Because I may not offer what they need. That's the truth. And knowing what they need and then taking action to support that need puts you in the area of as being a person of contribution and a resource to that individual. That's why I'm always looking to make contributions to other people. Why? Because it's a law of reciprocity. Is that at some point that might come back to me in some way, and it might not be from the person that I made a contribution to. So we talked about that. We also talked about references, giving your references a heads up. And perhaps if those references are even intimately engaged in your success, they might proactively reach out to a hiring team and give them an endorsement of some kind. If you think that's appropriate, isn't always, but sometimes if you're down at the end and it's between one or another, and you're one of two finalists, and you get some strong endorsements from some really good references, then that might push you over the top. So check in with your references, get prepared for that. And then I would just jump right back into the job search. You might give yourself some time, right? A moment of rest. But what I found is people often rest too long after an interview, and instead should perhaps consider getting back into the swing of things and determine, hey, how did I get this interview in the first place? And how can I replicate that process with the next employer or the next position within the same employer I just interviewed with? Good. Any questions, of course, put those in the chat. Happy to answer. Doesn't look like we have any today, so I might just get rid of the chat overlay. And if somebody does have a question, we'll pop those up on the screen. And by the way, this is the Pacific Ocean. And yes, that is over here. Where is it? Over there. I don't have the mirrored video like I do on Zoom. So over there is Manzanita Beach, one of my favorite beaches. Been going there a long time. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. Happy to answer. Other than that, we can just go through the news and see what's what here on LinkedIn and see if there's anything new to share that might be of value to anybody that is interested. Okay, so we'll come back to share screen. Okay, any work from anywhere lures tech talent. That's something, just looking at that headline, my suspicion is if you have value to add to the marketplace, it's likely they're going to hire you and they're not going to care where you work. Now, they may ask you to travel or come check in once in a while. But if you have value in the marketplace, you can name your terms. Let's just say it that way. So let's see what this article says. It says remote work. One day will tell you it's not a perk. The next day it's the hottest perk. So which is it? That's for employers to decide. No, actually, that is not true. It's for the marketplace to decide. And if the employer is going to decide and they're not able to get talent, guess what? They lose. So the marketplace will decide, not the employer. So the marketplace would be where you and the employer are coming from the same place. You're coming from the same place. Good. So let's see. Bloomberg argues that in order to not only keep top talent, but to lure new talent, companies have to offer flexibility via the option to work from anywhere. I don't think they have to, but they should consider it. And there should be a give and a take, because the benefit of having that asset, and I call it an asset for a reason, because it's a human being, having that asset on board far outweighs where that asset comes from or is delivering the value. That's where, you go back to things like economics. The foundation of economics is mobility of labor. And the nice thing about the United States is we have freedom, and there's flexibility, and there's mobility. And that means with certainly the advent of the internet and other technologies, that I can still deliver value without being located in the space where people are delivering that value. The appeal of flashy campuses or adult playgrounds with bowling alleys and foosball, once a requirement for Silicon Valley job seekers, has been replaced for many by a newfound love for the home office. Now, I don't know if everybody would call that a newfound love, but because some people have had flexible work arrangements, and it's something that many companies have offered. I know here in Portland, I think, Nike offers in the summers no Zoom Fridays or no work on Fridays, right? There's no work on Fridays. And then I think for the last week of August or something, they're shutting down the entire company and everybody gets the day off. Of course, those who are maybe running the website aren't going to turn off the website. So my guess is there's still people probably working in key areas, but for the most part, that company is shut down. So these are flexible work arrangements that if the company and their leaders are listening and paying attention and wanting to have engaged employees, then they ought to consider these things. They ought to consider the flexibility quotient. So I don't know if this is unique to tech talent, but it's unique to talent. And if you have demand in the marketplace for your services and there's low supply, then you have leverage. That's just how it works. Okay, fired for venting on Slack. That's interesting. I think I saw a little snippet on this earlier. Let's see what it is. Netflix has drawn a line in the sand for those who take to Slack to grumble about coworkers. The streaming giant parted ways with 3 marketing executives after it unearthed conversations on the popular work messaging app in which the trio was secretly griping about management. THR.com reports in a statement, Netflix denies that the employees were let go for talking negatively about their bosses. Rather, it claims their statements violated the company's transparency culture. Interesting. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. That is a form of feedback. And that's unfortunate that those marketing executives are no longer there. But maybe that is an indicator of the corporate culture there. And maybe they're better off not being there. I've always been the type that we need to give people, and I need to give myself a little bit of space and grace and to have those conversations. And if I'm not getting that from my leader, then I need to take responsibility for that conversation. And you can use things like crucial conversations and educate yourself on that. You could use things like situation behavior impact. It's a framework. You can look it up on YouTube. There's a great video on that. SBI, situation behavior impact. I found it really interesting. I share it out a lot when people are having a hard time giving feedback. I always ask permission to give feedback. And if I don't have permission, I don't give the feedback. That's just the way it works. COVID cases up. MLB season, what does it say? Uncertain. That's interesting. Gearing up to take the field on Thursday, the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox had to postpone their midseason game after 3 vaccinated pitchers tested positive for COVID-19. The Yankees have reached Major League Baseball's required 85% vaccination rate and are now experiencing breakthrough cases. Like this wasn't going to happen. The vaccine has not been thoroughly evaluated over the course of many years, and so the breakthrough rate, I would assume, and I'm not a virologist or anything, I would assume it'd be higher than a normal vaccine. The team's general manager said the outbreak will force them to reevaluate everything we have done and consider changing protocols. Deaths from the virus are on the rise again after weeks of decline as the Delta variant rips through unvaccinated populations. I like the flowery, anxiety, fear-ridden language. So pay attention to language and what you allow into your head. So I'm gonna skip over that one. Free-to-lay workers on strike. Companies plan for smaller. Let's see, smaller workforces. I don't know that companies are planning for smaller workforces. I think they're forced to deal with smaller workforces because there's just a lack of people going back to work. And if they are, they're going to perhaps go to work in a different industry, doing different things. So keep that in mind. And again, they're quoting the Wall Street Journal. I'm not going to click on that article because I don't want to give them the credit for that link. But the idea here is, hey, companies are going to have to do what they have to do, and they may have to offer bonuses, signing bonuses, additional compensation, that sort of thing. Good to see you, Tracy. 4-day work week. Yeah. The Bay Area lives. That's interesting. What does that mean? Similar to New York City, much was written about the Bay Area and its fading appeal in the face of the pandemic. The dire warnings about tech workers leaving the region forever now appear overheated. Writes the New York Times, many who fled to other cities to ride out the pandemic are returning. The tech giants like Google and Twitter expanding their footprints in Mountain View and San Jose. Of course, there's plenty of room. Where is that? Wherever Oracle was. So I'm sure they'll be offering some real estate options there for those who would like it. But perhaps for those who don't, companies that don't pay a lot of taxes in California, they maybe can stay in California, but we'll see. J&J recalls 5 spray sunscreens. Yeah, that's not a shocker. A win for 4-day work weeks. Is that the one you're talking about there, Tracy? Hopefully it is. Iceland's trial of shorter work weeks has been hailed as overwhelming success. 86% of workers now either on shorter hour contracts or in positions to negotiate. The trial cut work weeks from 40 to 35 and 36. Is there really that much of a difference? 4 hours? That's not a 4-day work week. That's just people squishing 40 hours into 4 days versus, so that's 4 10s is what we're saying. Or, it really is not that much different. That's like a half day. No pay in range. The findings indicated that reducing work hours actually maintained or increased productivity and improved well-being and work-life balance. Work-life balance I could see, and that could lead to well-being, but increased productivity. I think a lot of people, there's no end to their work. And the reason they're more productive is because they invest more hours and they just don't document those hours. I just know that to be fact. And so they're not paid for the hours. They're just putting in more work. And there is a law of diminishing returns that you might fatigue at a certain level. But at 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day, you're not going to fatigue. And I would argue that, hey, even though you show up for 40, 35, 36 hours a week, you're probably not actually delivering 40 hours worth of value. Just a guess. Debt soars despite dip in borrowing. Interesting. Even as scores of Americans are borrowing less money amid the pandemic, overall consumer debt remains higher than ever. Despite increased debit card use and faster payments on credit card balances, debt soared $14.6 trillion in the first 3 months of the year per Bloomberg, thanks to swelling student loans and huge demand for home and auto loans. Meanwhile, government aid put more money into the people's wallets and deterred them from borrowing and squeezing the profit engine for banks. Yeah, I don't know what's driving that. I know that the cost of money is super low, right? The interest rates are super low. So, taking on consumer debt, refinancing perhaps a student loan probably wouldn't be that too far off. A 3-day weekend could help recharge the battery. Yeah, if people take time off to do that. Not everybody. I think some people really do love to work. They just love work. And some people don't. But I don't know that we can make a blanket statement across the board for everybody's situation. Everybody's unique, different, and has a set of circumstance. The idea is that the organization should honor that circumstance as much as possible, so that they can get the most out of the people that work for them. Sales jobs, they're a hard sell. What? Open sales roles are on the rise as companies emerge from the pandemic, but firms are struggling to find new hires. The field can't seem to shake its bad reputation for pressure cooker environments. The Wall Street Journal reports. Again, they're quoting the Wall Street Journal. I don't know why LinkedIn or Microsoft doesn't just buy the Wall Street Journal. Anyway, that's another question. And it's deterring job candidates despite recent industry changes and higher pay. Those in sales say it's no longer about cold calls and pressure tactics. Rather, sales has evolved to focus on empathy, curiosity, and communicating with customers. The funny thing is that's never changed. The salespeople that do well have empathy, curiosity, ask a lot of questions, communicate well with customers, and help them solve problems. That is still the case. And yes, it is about generating leads. That's one of the pillars of sales, is lead generation. So whether the company is doing that or the salesperson is doing that, or you have an SDR doing that, it's still, you don't have to use pressure tactics, but you certainly do still need to generate leads. So I think what we're seeing here in the news is that there is a need for a lot of people in the marketplace. And if you are looking to change careers, or to perhaps get a promotion or move to a company that's more aligned with your values, now might be the time to do that. And we're running into summer. People are taking vacations, yes, but people are also taking staycations just as usual. And they may not be able to find a place to stay, even though things are opening up. Many places, I think, where did I hear? Was this, it was Hawaii. Hawaii instituted a tax on travelers. so that they could cover some of the expense of trying to staff up and get the the tourism industry back on its feet. So if you wanted to go to Hawaii, there might be a tax. I also heard on the news yesterday that there were hotel executives actually cleaning rooms after somebody stayed in them. So strapping on the apron and going to work that way. Anyhow, these are it just pays to look at the opportunity in every one of these news articles, because now I can say, okay, what can I do in that space to add value, to help J&J with recall of sunscreens, to what about the 4-day work week can I implement into my search, and that sort of thing. And am I really optimizing my satisfaction on the job? And that's where each of us can take ownership of our own destiny that way and make a plan. Good. Let's see what Tracy says. Fast Company had published an article a few years ago that indicated most people have a productive 6 hours for a workday. You're correct. There's a law of diminishing returns. Yes. So even though they may be there for 8 hours, they're only giving 6 hours of value. So in essence, they are already working a 4-day work week, because 1 day a week they're not working, even though they're at work. So just being at work doesn't mean you're working, is what I'm suggesting. Let's see, what else did Tracy say here? Yes, but scroll down to the Hawthorne Effect, where people show increased productivity temporarily. Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of research, but if you just observe people, you'll have all the research you need to know. I've had people send me emails at 2 a.m. Why on earth are you working at 2 a.m, 1 a.m? Sometimes the work never goes away. And if you have a deadline, you work. That's just the way it is. And yes, you may be inefficient in that process, but it gets done. It may take several hours. That wouldn't have taken that long if you did it under a normal deadline. But sometimes deadlines are deadlines, and you don't have the staff or the capacity to delegate. What do you do? So, but I think from a candidate perspective, companies need to be a little more flexible that way. And I can see some companies having the, how would you say it? They have, they're eager to hire people and bring them on board and then train them and then work them 60 hours a week, because there's so much work to do. And the challenge is going to be easing people into that work, or maintaining that kind of balance, and then bring other additional people on board. So there's going to be some pain here as people go back to the office, and some folks don't want to go. That's just, I think that's just the reality now. Good. Any other questions out there? Put them in the chat. Happy to answer. If you want to come on live, you can do that. Let's see, questions. There we go. The link, regardless of what platform you're joining from, the link is in the description above, top right. On LinkedIn, you would click see more. If you're on YouTube, I believe it's down below the video. There should be a link there to join. And then certainly put your LinkedIn profile in the chat if you want people to reach out to you and that sort of thing. But yeah, get in tune with the news. I don't know if you have any other questions about interview or post-interview follow-up. But I think there's a lot that you can do to follow up post-interview outside of sending your references or sending a thank you note and that sort of thing. And then looking for new other opportunities. It might be, developing a step-by-step plan to push your candidacy over the top. And that might include things like, sending articles of interest, sending them maybe a 30, 60, 90 plan, that sort of thing. Even better, I think it's really fun and exciting and neat when you can be there. You can be there when they haven't developed an opportunity yet, and you get to have how would you call it, a organic discussion on certain things. Good. What are some good questions you ask in the interview process as a candidate or as a interviewer, because they're two different things. But as someone being interviewed, a candidate, I'm going to ask questions in really 4 categories. One, I'm going to ask about the person, right? How long they've been there, what do they like about working at the company, that sort of thing. I'm going to ask questions about their role in the company. What is your role in the company, and how would you and I interact on a day-to-day? I want to know that. Third question would be regarding the future, right? Where do you see your organization, your specific part of the company going in the future? Where do you see the highest need? Where do you see skills that are in high demand but low supply? Okay. And then the fourth one is I'm going to ask questions about the company more broadly, as relates to values. And so that might be a little more sensitive, and you need to practice those kind of questions. Like, if my definition of work-life balance is 3-day weekends, that to me is life balance, then I would want to know how they allocate weekend work, if any. How do you go about allocating weekend work? Yeah, that's nice. Thank you, Tracy, for that. So, it really takes some effort to develop, the questions in those 4 areas. So again, about the person, their role in the company and how you'll interact with them, the future, and the company more broadly as relates to mission, vision, and values, and how they're lived out in the organization. Let's see what Tracy says. Thank you, Tracy, for the contributions. If you're watching this broadcast on LinkedIn, then you can click the name of the person who commented, and a box will pop up with a connect button. Now, does it let you put in a note, Tracy, or does it just send a connect request? Because I think it's valuable that you actually personalize that request. And if you were to connect with somebody like Miles here, then you'd want to send him a personalized request. Okay. Good. I like, what do you consider a successful employee 6 months into this job, 1 year into this job? Interesting. How would you measure success for an employee after 6 months? Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. You could probably think of some better ones in conjunction with that. Part of this is, when you're asking these questions, is not to make the person feel like they're being cornered or in some way diminished, because they may not have the answer that you're looking for. So be cautious about some of those questions. But it sends a connect request. I just tried it for the first time. Okay, good. So you need to go to the profile page and click from there and send a personalized request. That's just good practice. What do you think of per diem offer? Yeah, as long as I get cash every day. Is that large bills or small bills? So I would be into that if it was cash and it wasn't recorded anywhere and I didn't have to pay tax on it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Ha ha ha. So laugh at that one. No, I mean, if you could be more specific there, I think, it's funny. I was just seeing that companies are moving toward a more accelerated delivery of pay. In fact, ADP, I think, has a strategic partnership with a company that's going to deliver that to like 2 days early to a debit card, a prepaid debit card, so that you don't have to have a bank account. And I think that'll be appealing to a lot of populations that that don't have or don't want or don't need a bank account. So yeah, I don't see any issue with that. I think the offer should also contain some kind of stipulations about how long that's going to last and what's the conversion process, and is it through a third party or is it direct hire, right? There's a lot more to negotiate there than just, hey, should I accept a per diem offer? Good. Got the questions coming in finally. Only took 45 minutes. Well, 30 to 45 minutes, somewhere in there. Any other questions out there? Go ahead and put them in the chat. Happy to answer. If you yourself want to come on live, there is a link in the description. If you don't want to post your questions to the rest of the people here on LinkedIn, you can use that link to come into the green room and put in a confidential anonymous question into the chat, the private chat on the backside of this Restream program. Good. So put those certainly put those questions in the chat. Come on live and drop your questions in there if you prefer, and then I'm happy to answer. If not, we can bow out, and you all can have a great weekend. And I'll see you next Career Happy Hour. That is, I have a lot to share. I'm not sure what's relevant and timely for you unless you put a question in the chat. All right, so I'm going to bow out then. No more questions. It's fine by me. All right, folks, have a good weekend. Hit the beach, go outside, get some fresh air, and we'll see you next happy hour. Bye now.